Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the US. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the US and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is home ownership consultant Ross Kay from thewealthyhomeowner.ca. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
Thanks for having me back, Jim.
Ross, with all the mainstream media filled with warnings and forecasts for Canada's housing market ranging from the fear of a market crash to rising home prices as buyers rush in to beat the mortgage rule changes, a listener asks, should I be listing my home for sale and getting it sold before things change?
Well, yeah, that's probably one of the most common questions that people are asking today, Jim. And I can understand the confusion that this listener has, because you can read things out there from well-respected economists saying that the housing market is going to crash because of the debt load that we're in and even the new mortgage rule changes. And then on the other hand, you're reading stories where banks and real estate agents are telling you, and their economists are telling you that housing prices are only going to rise because of this, because people are going to jump into the market, buy before the rule changes, which if that did happen, would mean that the housing market would have to continue on for a longer period of time before they believed the market was going to start to correct, or the market to slow down. Let's remember the commentary about the mortgage rule changes making people buy their home now to beat the mortgage rules. Well, if there's a surge in sales today, that creates a new wave that has to work its way through the sales chain. It creates a new wave of buyers, and they buy a house, and that's going to set off a series of transactions that naturally have to take place in order for those buyers to get into the market.
Ross, would you call this a new wave of panic buying? And is there need for this panic?
No, and I believe this is the one rare occurrence, Jim, where you're probably not going to see it take place. I think that when we look at the market as it existed for the last 4 years, as this particular cycle has worked its way out, we have never had a cycle of this magnitude. So we have never watched this ever happen in Canadian history. The dynamics that have been fueling this market are once in a lifetime. Well, all housing markets are once in a lifetime, but this particular set of dynamics happened at a time where social media, the press started to do less research by the journalists. They started to, because of the print media being constrained, profits, newspapers folding. Reporters have not been paid enough to allow them to go out and do their job reporting on the housing market. They've been forced to regurgitate press releases from real estate boards. It's sort of like it was, as I've said it before, the perfect storm existed. Even those conditions cannot be maintained. The market had reached such a, as we said in your show, a tsunami. So the wave has gotten so large, it became a tsunami, and a tsunami has to reach ground. It has to crash. It has to correct, and that's what we're looking at now. So for this particular listener who's asking, should I be listing my home for sale and getting it sold before things change? The answer is simple, but it's very, very complex. Every single homeowner in Canada owns their home in a certain time in their life, under a certain set of variables. There is no such thing as a one-all solution for today's housing market when the question is posed, should I be listing my home for sale? The only people you'll get an answer from that treats everything as if it's the same are realtors. And those realtors will give you an answer depending on what's going to make them money. If they need to list your property, they're going to encourage you to list and sell now. If they think you want to buy a property, they're going to encourage you to buy now so they can make commission. The answer is complicated in that you have to look at your home ownership, where you are in your home ownership life cycle, your lifetime of home ownership. You need to look at the market that you're in, the category of home you're in, the condition that your home is in. You've got to look at your mortgage financing. You've got to look at your own personal net wealth, and you've got to take into consideration all of these factors before you give someone an answer. It's not a simple, well, it's a simple answer that is very complex. Unless you're plugging all of these different variables into the equation that's going to give the solution or the answer to the question, should I list my home for sale now, you're going to give bad advice. And unfortunately, throughout Canadian history, that has been the only advice that has been given. The advice that will get realtors a commission. We don't give our advice that way. We look at each individual person, homeowner, home buyer, home seller, under their own circumstances. And from that, we can supply them with the information that we believe should lead them in a certain direction, but certainly information that they can take and make it their own rational, informed decision about the largest asset class in this country, that being home ownership equity.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after the break.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork will commence later this year. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, we've read nonstop about the mortgage rule changes coming, and recently the Mortgage Brokers Association said their phones have been ringing off the hook for people wanting to know what should they do before the new rules take effect. Do you know if banks are adopting B20 guidelines before the January 1st implementation date?
Okay, so part of our market intelligence are the connections that we have with a network of professionals across Canada. Now, this is a long time that was developed. So when we put out a survey or a questionnaire, our responses are virtually instantaneous. In other words, we can get a couple thousand responses to a survey within 24 hours. There is an exchange that goes on between Ross K. Realty Consultants, which is my company that supplies the intelligence for the wealthy homeowner programs. We have connections across Canada. So when you ask me a question like this, luckily, this is something that we get fed weekly responses from our network of professionals that we deal with. So I can tell you that within a week of the OSFI formalizing this rule change for January the 1st, banks have already adjusted what they're doing in terms of qualification. Now, because we have interconnections within the bank, in other words, senior VPs, branch bank managers, the people that we're consulting with on these questions are the leaders in the financing community at the bank. These aren't mortgage brokers, some mortgage broker. No, these are the guys at the bank that run the banks. They are always looking for profits, and they have to turn a profits for their shareholders. And they understand what's going on in the market and the risk that the banks are heading into in 2018. With slower mortgage volumes being recorded by their banks. So they have to seek profits. One of the easiest ways to seek profits is to take advantage of your existing clients whenever you can, which is how banks always operate. I know we're always surprised by that statement, but that is simply the way it has always been. I have never, ever, so for the 40 years my family was selling real estate, we would never let a client go to a bank and talk to a banker. We just wouldn't do it because we know the bank will take advantage of our client any way possible to make a buck for their branch. Whether that's over lending them money, or it's charging them a higher interest rate, or misguiding them in terms of the steps they should be taking. So we would never use it. Yet the same time, the banks were around us, just offering us whatever they could think of offering us to get us their business. Trips down south, holidays in Hawaii, points cards. It was just unbelievable, the offers that we used to get. So what I know is, Jim, is that the banks are already taking advantage of this rule. So there are people out there who would go to the bank, and the bank is going to allude them to the opinion that the rule's coming in place and that their own bank has already started instituting. If that means they can get an extra 0.1% on the interest rate, they're going to charge you at renewal. So yes, these rules are already impacting the market. As we go forward over the next 45 days, these rules will gradually increase. When some data gets released this week by the Canadian Real Estate Association and Terranet National Bank, you're going to see that change again. The banks know their profit margins are shrinking. They will use this rule to take advantage of the consumer's ignorance, and actually the universal ignorance that is taking place on this rule. And there will only be very few people who are not financially harmed by the banks as they utilize this rule to raise their profit.
In other words, they're going to tell you, well, we have to do it now. We don't have to wait, or how are they going to?
Exactly, Jim. That's exactly what's going to happen. They'll say, oh, yes, the rule's coming in January the 1st, but our policy is that anyone with that has a credit score of, say, below 750, and they're coming in for renewing their mortgage, and they want to have it done without getting a new appraisal done on their property. Well, we can still do it, but what we have to do is we just got to charge you a little bit higher interest rate. Other than that, we have to go through the whole qualification process, and you'd have to qualify under the more restrictive terms. Oh, people say, I don't want to do that because they have a misunderstanding they're not going to qualify. Gives the bank the power. The bank really hasn't lied. They simply have directed you into giving an answer that works to their advantage by not answering all of your questions, and they gain additional profits from you. Not only this, I mean, they can coerce the number of things. I know there's this tied selling limitation that the banks have. Well, there is a difference between forcing you in tied selling to using Velcro instead of nuts. So they use the Velcro. What they do is they say that they allude that it's in your best interest to be taking advantage of other bank products, without directly saying, oh, the only condition we'll use is if you do use them. They allude instead. So like I said, this OSFI rule change, it is a financially harmful rule change to every single person with a mortgage, unless you're highly engaged in what's going on. So we have people right now, Jim, that are asking us to give them their mortgage review. So we do mortgage reviews for members of the Wealthy Homeowner. In their mortgage review, we can put them to ease that there is no fear of the mortgage rule in their case. Or if they need to take action, which very, very seldom does that need to happen, they're aware of the action they need to take and they can act on it. They do not walk into the banks and fall to the mercy of that smiling, nice, local lady from the community who they see every time they go into the bank, who's always asking them how their kids are. Meanwhile, they're just looking to get an extra $1,000 out of your pocket over the next 5 years.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, last weekend, the provincial regulator for real estate in Ontario wrote a piece in the Toronto Star about things people should look for when looking to sell their home. Did you see that article, and do you think it was well thought out?
It was another Ask Joe article in the Toronto Star. So the registrar here in Ontario, Joe Richter, for some reason decided he needed PR. Now this, you have to understand, folks. The registrar in Ontario had no experience with real estate at all. Zero. He was the former registrar for funeral homes. That is what his qualification was when he was hired to be the registrar for Ontario for real estate. He, as a result of that, he knows nothing about a housing market. He knows nothing about the systems that have been evolved over the last few decades. He is totally controlled or directed by the board of directors, who are all real estate agents. So that's the format that we're under here. So when he issues one of these Ask Joe articles in the Toronto Star, I pull it out as a learning material for our own staff here, because I go through it and I tell them the nonsense that is in this article. And the article that you're questioning is another example of the misleading instructions, recommendations, information that the registrar for real estate in the province of Ontario puts out. Nowhere in this article does the registrar say that here is a list of 50 things that your real estate agent must be able to do in order for you to pay them the going commission rate. Okay, he doesn't have that list. What he does in the article, and I encourage all of your listeners to Google Ask Joe Toronto Star and read the last issue that he put out in Saturday. He vaguely talks about each real estate agent is different. You've got to ask them what they do, and then you've got to decide whether or not they're the person for you to pick. Well, real estate agents are all salespeople. When they're in front of you with their presentation, they're trying to sell you on using their services. They are not sitting there and telling you they don't have any formal training in desktop publishing. They don't tell you that they don't have any training in real estate markets. They don't tell you that they have had, other than learning by themselves, they've never taken a course on how to take photographs of a house. They're not telling you that they don't even know what a Google AdWord is, or they don't know how to create a website for your property. They have no idea how the data distribution facility, a technology supplied by the Canadian Real Estate Association, can cause a homeowner to totally lose all their personal data if they're put on the DDF in the wrong way. They have no idea. If you go to Realtor.ca today, listen, Jim, all of your listeners, get over to Realtor.ca right after the show airs. Get over there and start clicking on listings. And then you look at the written portion of the listing. Now, unless there is a full page of selling details, like written words telling a story about a property on that listing page, it means the listing has not been filled out completely, accurately. It means that they have followed traditional norms through inexperience, ignorance, lack of education, lack of study, and all of the things required to market and sell a property. They don't have those. When you see a listing where there is a full page of creative writing done on that listing on Realtor.ca, you know you stumbled onto the 1 in 10 or 100,000 listings that may have been filled out properly. And I'm going to tell your listeners, you are going to struggle to find one of those listings out there today. The simple act of writing copy for an advertising of a $500,000, $1 million property, it is a highly skilled requirement that you really do need post-secondary education training to learn. I mean, yes, I was lucky. I wrote literally thousands of ads, but before I wrote them, I had to go to college and learn copywriting skills. I had to take other courses about advertising before I was writing ads for our clients. That doesn't happen in the industry. Now, Ask Joe doesn't tell anybody that. And that's only one of the dozens of things that a home seller should be entitled to when they're selling their home.
So, Ross, what you're telling us is Joe doesn't know Jack.
Well, listen, in my personal opinion today, Jim, is this. If I am going to do a listing today, I'm hiring Jim. I'm hiring you to do the voiceover for my virtual tour. You are going to be talking the words that a copywriter wrote on that property. After the copywriter for the property had been given a set of target markets that copy was supposed to be attracting. That's the way that it should be done when you're paid tens of thousands of dollars to market a property. But the registrar won't ever talk about that because he has no idea what I'm talking about. He believes that a guy with a cell phone camera taking pictures, HDR pictures of a house and posting them on Realtor.ca justifies earning tens of thousands of dollars of commission. It's bizarre. There's a reason why either you get the training yourself, so you qualify as a skilled photographer, or you hire a photographer to take the photograph. There are also copyright laws, why you want to make sure that you own the copyright to the photographs of the interior of your client's home. Joe didn't talk about any of these things because 99.99% of the realtors have no idea what I'm even talking about. They believe you get the listing signed, put it on Realtor.ca, and it'll sell. Well, I'll tell you folks, 30% of the time, 30% of the months that have taken place from 1980 through today, that may have been the case. But 70% of the months, that wasn't true. And of those 30% where it was true, 66% of the properties that were listed for sale didn't sell. That's what the truth is. Ask Joe cannot talk about the incompetence of realtors. Ask Joe cannot talk about the failure of realtors. Ask Joe cannot truthfully even tell the public in Ontario that you cannot hire a realtor to get you the lowest price possible, even though that's the law. Those words still will not come out of his mouth. So any consumer who looked at that article And la 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 la. Yeah, that's what all my neighbors did. That's what go ahead, folks. Lose $10, $15, $20, $50,000 today. Forget that money would have accumulated in a TFSA for the next 30 years, which I'm sure there's some great financial advisor who follow me on the House Street that can show you how to invest. Go ahead and do it. And if you don't want to be the fool, if you don't want to be someone taken advantage of by organized real estate, then you've got to act. If you just simply listen to what the registrar says, like it should be obvious when people read this. This is just more PR for real estate agents. So that's my commentary on those type of articles, Jim.
This week, the Canadian Real Estate Association and the Terranet National Bank will release their house price index. What should our listeners be looking to hear, and what should they understand when they hear these numbers?
Well, what they should understand is listen to previous shows where I told you that both Terranet National Bank and Korea are in full cover-up mode. Okay, they have been caught because the methodologies that they use for their house price indexes, for their benchmark prices, for everything they have released to the press for the last 4 years has finally caught up with them. The way that those stats are created do not follow how a real estate market functions. They are not designed for a market that rises and falls. They are designed for a market that goes forward on a straight to plane into forever. And that's why those metrics are failed. And now those metrics are no longer working for them. So you're hearing all kinds of excuses now. First of all, this summer, that we all know, because if you listen to this show, the MLS benchmark price methodology changed. They went back in and backdated and changed every single house price measure that has been released for the benchmark price. They did it under the terms of, we've had to adjust it. Yeah, they adjusted it, and remember, they didn't tell anybody. It was buried at the bottom of a footnote in the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver's press release. It was never told to the public. So they have been in full correction mode there. They have minimized their margin of error by going and backdating and changing everything, so it doesn't look as big. Then you have Terranet National Bank, and it was only 2 months ago where all of a sudden they came up with the words, we have a smooth model that we don't release to the public. And our smooth model is telling us that as our metric goes ahead, as our regular model goes ahead, it's going to be moderated. So we already know that the prices are moving downwards, even though our HBI is say they're going up. You never heard anybody talk about a smooth model. It's just a bunch of gobbledygook come up by economists and statisticians to try to explain their methodologies for house prices isn't correct. So it all comes down to this, Jim. Everything you're going to hear released this week, when you look at what's being said from the eyes of the buyer, everything changes. When you look at housing prices as how much money buyers are able to pay, it's a totally different thing than how much houses are worth. When you look at the numbers of sales and you see declining sales, you look from the eyes of the buyer, you see a real estate market slowing down. That's why we know since last November, the entire Canadian real estate market as a whole has been slowing down. We know that. And these numbers are irrefutable because we know that every piece of data that's released, the statistic, is actually some sort of a buyer metric. And unless you can interpret it from the buyer's side, it's worthless, as all of these methodologies have rolled out. So you're going to see, once again, the Terranet National Bank House Price Index has fallen. You're going to hear, well, why hasn't it fallen as much as they say that it has in Toronto? and you're going to hear some new excuse that the economists come up with, or conversely, the economists are going to hide again this month, which is what they do most of the time. Even the Canadian Real Estate Association, that used to have Greg Klump, their head economist, in every single media outlet available for over 3 years, he's disappeared. You don't see him anymore because they've been caught. What they're hoping on is that the calamity of the market is going to cover up the fact that they have misled the public for years. I'm looking at the data here, Jim, today. So what your listeners need to understand. There are regional markets in Canada where the multiplication of counting has created huge data errors for the Canadian Real Estate Association. Errors that the Canadian Real Estate Association admitted to in the Huffington Post back in 2013, where they claimed it was only a 0.8% error, which even then it was actually about 4%, now has multiplied to a point where it's impacting the market, even in the instances they thought about, by about 3%. When you look at the overall impact, i.e., sales that now the Canadian Real Estate Association counts for sale by owners. In 2013, they didn't. So from 2013 till today, all of their housing numbers were inflated. That added to the ability to create this hysteria and the fear of missing out, because they kept saying there was record after record after record. But at the same time, they didn't say, oh, by the way, our record, we count for sale by owners now. We never used to count them, but now we're counting them. So when you adjust the numbers and remove the for sale by owners, we really didn't hit a record. You haven't heard that once in Canada. And that's what's really coming home to roost, because it's examples of this. There are literally dozens and dozens of statistical errors that have rendered everything that's been told to the Canadian public, at least since 2012 forward, nonsense. It's why when we say things about the housing market, everyone else out there says, what the heck are they talking about? That's not what we're seeing in the market. Yeah, that's right, because you're not seeing the adjusted numbers. You're seeing numbers that the real estate boards release. Example, Jim. Burlington, my hometown. The Toronto Real Estate Board told everybody in Ontario that Burlington home sales had dropped 33% in the month of October. Yet, the truthful number is home sales increased 6% in the month of October. In the town of Oakville, it was a 15% variance. They said the market was off, I think, by minus 25% or something like that, and the market was only down minus 9. These errors happen all over Canada. In Vancouver and British Columbia, it's the fact that you never get Vancouver real estate numbers released by the Vancouver Real Estate Board. You don't get the Fraser Valley component that should be included in the Greater Vancouver numbers. Like in Ontario, you don't get all of the Greater Toronto numbers because the Toronto Real Estate Board is only getting partial numbers from some of the outlying cities. Your listeners need to understand this. Unless someone has ever told you what I just said, you need to fire them. If your realtor has never explained to you what I just explained to you, fire them. They have lied to you. And as a matter of fact, if they didn't tell you what I just said and you've done business with them in the last 4 years, you should be able to get all of your commissions fully refunded to you. That's the truth. The realtor or the broker owner will happily accept refunding you your commission instead of you taking them to court and filing charges, a complaint with the regulator. Because in court, not only are they going to have to repay you your money because they gave you bad advice, they didn't tell you the whole story, they're going to be charged, and their name will appear online with the provincial regulator for 5 years for breaking the rules. Plus, they get a fine and have to take educational training when they're found guilty with the real estate board. So what you're going to see this week, Jim, when the CREA releases and the Terranet National Bank releases, is a cover-up. Cover-up for the previous 4 years of lying to the public as they try to catch up to where the market is really at. And they're shaking their heads because they don't know what I'm talking about either. Economists have no idea what I'm talking about because they've never worked a real estate market. They don't know how a market functions. They don't know how buyers and sellers interact. They don't know how the MLS data is calculated. They don't even know what the footnotes mean in the reports that they release because they don't have an underlying education to understand those footnotes. And that's what you're going to see this week, Jim.
Ross?
Cover up, recovery.
Ross, we'll chat with you next week, and we'll talk about their attempted cover-up.
Awesome, Jim.
My guest has been Ross Kay, home ownership consultant who works at wealthyhomeowner.ca. You're listening to HoweStreet.com radio. If you have any questions for our guests or the show, they can be sent to info@HoweStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HoweStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HoweStreet.com radio is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.